The void of space stretched endlessly, a black canvas dotted with the faint light of distant stars. Among these stars, 5 systems had already bowed to the might of the cosmic emperor, a ruler whose name struck fear across the galaxy. His fleet of starships, sleek and glinting like silver sharks, had moved with precision and speed, leaving planets in submission without mercy. Yet for all his power, the emperor's mind was restless. He had conquered 5 systems, and now the weight of something unseen pressed upon him. Aboard the flagship Dominion, the emperor stood at the observation deck, his tall frame silhouetted against the panorama of stars. His eyes, cold and sharp, reflected the glow of distant suns. Around him, the bridge hummed with activity, officers monitoring communications, navigational charts, and weapon systems. Every corner of the ship was a testament to human engineering and ingenuity. Humans had become the apex species of this galaxy not through mere numbers, but through strategy, technology, and unyielding determination. "Status report," the Emperor said, his voice low but commanding. "Systems Theta, Sigma, Epsilon, Delta, and Rho are under our control," reported Admiral Kale, a man whose loyalty had never wavered, even in the darkest battles. "All governments dissolved, starports operational, resistance minimal." Conquest had become routine, almost mechanical, and yet there was something unusual this time. The reports from the last system, Rho, had been different. The resistance there had fought harder, not with weapons alone, but with an unspoken defiance that puzzled his advisors. "Explain, Kale," the Emperor commanded. "The inhabitants, they didn't surrender immediately," Kale said carefully. "They evacuated, yes, but they left messages, symbols, and words. One in particular stood out, repeated on every wall, broadcast, and banner. It was a single word, my Emperor." Even among seasoned officers, the word carried an unspoken power. "Humanity," the Emperor repeated, tasting the syllables. It was simple, but it carried an echo of something vast, something more than conquest, more than control. It reminded him of Earth, the cradle of the species he now ruled with an iron fist, but Earth had been centuries behind the forefront of human expansion. Humanity had spread, evolved, and now, through him and his fleet, it dominated the stars. And yet the word gnawed at him. "Why this word?" he asked, not to Kale, but to himself. Kale cleared his throat. "It appears, my Emperor, that the people of Rho were not just resisting our power. They were reminding us, reminding you, that there is more to human achievement than domination. They believe that even in conquest, humanity cannot be extinguished." "Prepare a direct transmission to Rho," the Emperor said finally. "I want to understand this. Send a small delegation, not soldiers. I will hear what they have to say in person." His voice carried the calm certainty of a man who had faced insurmountable odds and always prevailed. "But curiosity requires courage. Humanity has spread too far, achieved too much, to ignore a single word." For the first time in centuries, the Emperor felt uncertainty. On the planet below, the inhabitants watched from hidden enclaves. Children and elders alike had evacuated to safety, leaving behind the empty streets and towers. But they had not left in fear, they had left in hope, leaving behind their word as a beacon. Humanity. She had witnessed the rise of the human empire, the unstoppable fleet that claimed world after world. Yet she was not afraid. She had studied the old texts of her ancestors, the chronicles of human history, and she knew the truth. Humans were capable not only of conquest, but of courage, creativity, and compassion. "Are we ready?" she whispered to herself. Her companions nodded. They were scholars, engineers, historians, people who had devoted their lives to knowledge rather than war. Yet now they carried the most dangerous weapon of all, a message of resilience. Above them, the Emperor's ship descended into the upper atmosphere. It moved with silent majesty, dwarfing the cities below. The humans on Rho could hear the faint hum of engines, feel the pressure change as the ship hovered above them. And yet none of them fled. They stood together, holding signs, symbols, and words that expressed what their ancestors had fought for long before any empire rose. The Emperor watched from the observation deck as the delegation approached the landing zone. They were unarmed, yet he could sense the energy radiating from them. Not fear, not defiance, but purpose. When the delegation finally reached the Emperor, he descended from his ship, his tall frame casting a shadow over the assembled group. Leora stepped forward, bowing slightly, though her eyes remained steady. "My Emperor," she began, her voice clear and strong, "you have conquered 5 systems. You have power unlike any before you. And yet there is something you have not understood." It carried history, struggle, achievement, and hope. It was not a command, a threat, or a surrender. It was a reminder that humans were not mere pawns to be moved across the chessboard of space. They were alive, vibrant, and capable of something greater than fear. "Explain," the Emperor demanded, though his voice was quieter now. "Our species," Leora continued, "has survived countless wars, disasters, and oppressions. We have learned, adapted, and thrived. You may conquer our systems, control our resources, and bend our cities to your will, but you cannot conquer what makes us human. That is why we left the word. It is a warning and a promise." He had broken governments, yet here, on a single planet, he felt something he had not felt in decades: respect. And surprisingly, curiosity. "Curiosity is dangerous," he said softly, "but perhaps in this case it is necessary. You may command, but remember, humans do not surrender their essence so easily. Observation comes first. We will watch, we will learn, and then, perhaps we will see what humanity truly means." And in that silence across the void of space, the word echoed again, not just in the minds of the people of Rho, but in the mind of the Emperor himself: humanity. It was simple, yet immense. It was a challenge, a puzzle, and a promise all at once. The Emperor knew that the next steps would not be easy. The fleets that had conquered 5 systems might not conquer the spirit of those who understood the true meaning of being human. As the sun set on Rho, casting long shadows across the deserted cities, the Emperor stood alone in the observation deck, thinking. He had heard one word, and that word had changed everything. For the first time in centuries, the Emperor felt uncertain, and for the first time he wondered if his greatest conquest might not be a planet or a fleet, but something far more elusive: understanding humanity itself. And somewhere deep within him, a spark of something unexpected flickered: hope. The atmosphere of Rho was heavy with silence, yet it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of waiting, of careful observation. From the observation deck of the Dominion, the Emperor watched the delegation move across the empty city squares with precision and calm. They carried nothing but their minds, their words, and the unshakable belief that humanity could not be subdued by fleets or armies alone. Leora led her team with quiet authority. Engineers, historians, scholars, they were ordinary humans in appearance but extraordinary in resolve. They knew the Emperor's reputation, knew the fleets he commanded, the worlds he had brought under control. Yet they did not tremble. They were armed not with weapons but with ideas, and they understood that some battles could be won without violence. As the delegation arrived in the makeshift meeting chamber aboard the Dominion, the Emperor descended from his observation deck. His armor reflected the cold light of the chamber, silver plates overlapping like the scales of a predatory creature, yet his movements were composed, deliberate. Every step seemed to carry the weight of centuries of conquest. "My Emperor," Leora said, bowing slightly, "we come in peace as you requested, not as subjects, not as slaves, but as humans who wish to be understood." "You speak boldly," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Do you truly believe words can withstand fleets, commands, and armies? That is power you cannot destroy. Why humanity? It is the sum of all we have created, the choices we make, and the way we endure. You can conquer cities, take control of governments, but you cannot conquer the essence of what it means to be human." Yet something about this display unsettled him. It was not just a reminder of human potential, it was a reflection of the part of himself he had buried beneath ambition and conquest. "Impressive," he said, finally breaking the silence. "And yet it does not change the fact that I control these systems now. Your words cannot reverse that." He had built his power on strategy, intimidation, and an unwavering sense of destiny. Yet here in the quiet chamber of the Dominion, surrounded by humans who wielded no weapons, he felt a flicker of doubt. Not weakness, but awareness. Perhaps conquest alone was not the final measure of strength. Kale's voice broke into the tension. "My Emperor, these are dangerous thoughts. We cannot allow hesitation to take root. Action must follow command. And above all, we preserve the spark that defines us, the spark of humanity. You may control systems, but you cannot extinguish that spark." Humans had survived against overwhelming odds, not just through might, but through intelligence, courage, and collaboration. And now, after conquering 5 systems, he was beginning to understand that conquest was only one layer of existence. He walked toward Leora, his long cloak flowing behind him. "You speak as if humans are infallible," he said, a faint edge of curiosity in his voice. "You claim that essence cannot be destroyed. How do you explain wars, failures, betrayals?" "It is a challenge. Can those who conquer understand what they truly rule over? And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps his greatest conquest would not be of planets or systems, but of understanding. Leora stepped closer. Consider this, my emperor. A fleet without purpose is a weapon without direction. A ruler without understanding is a force without meaning. Humans can resist with courage, but they can also inspire loyalty, creativity, and ingenuity when they are understood and respected. That is power beyond fleets and armies. That is what you are facing now. Words alone, unarmed, unthreatening, yet full of conviction, could shift the perspective of a conqueror. He realized that humanity was not merely a species to dominate. It was a force that could teach, challenge, and perhaps even shape the ruler who thought himself above all. Kale shifted uneasily. My emperor, we cannot spend time pondering philosophy. Our fleets are poised to move. Our systems are under control. Humanity is resilient not because of fear or force, but because of intelligence, courage, and spirit. Those who wield power without understanding risk everything. Even fleets cannot compensate for ignorance of human nature. He watched as the wind stirred dust through deserted streets, as shadows shifted in the fading light. He considered the implications of Leora's words. A ruler could conquer lands, but true mastery required comprehension of the hearts, minds, and spirit of those who lived within them. A subtle shift occurred in the emperor's mind, almost imperceptible to his officers, yet undeniable to him. Curiosity had taken root. He wanted to test the words to see if they could withstand scrutiny, to discover if the delegation's faith in humanity was more than rhetoric. And perhaps, somewhere within him, he sensed that the answer could redefine his rule, his fleet, and the very concept of conquest itself. Prepare for long-term observation, he finally said. We will study the systems. We will engage with the people, and we will see if this, humanity, is truly as indomitable as you claim. In the quiet, the word echoed again, not as a command or a plea, but as a seed: humanity. For the first time, the emperor realized that conquest was not absolute. There were limits even to fleets, even to empires, when faced with the essence of what it meant to be human. And he knew, with a clarity he had never experienced, that the next phase of his reign would be different. It would require patience, observation, and perhaps even humility. Kale, watching the emperor, sensed the shift. This was no longer a simple campaign of control. The emperor's curiosity was dangerous, more dangerous than any fleet the galaxy had ever seen. He would challenge the delegation, test them, push them to extremes. And in doing so, Kale knew he might learn something neither of them had expected: that humans could influence even the most formidable conqueror through spirit alone. As night fell on Ro, the delegation returned to their temporary quarters, carrying the knowledge that they had survived the first test. They had faced the most powerful ruler in the galaxy with nothing but conviction, and they had not faltered. For humans, this was not victory in the conventional sense, it was affirmation. They had reminded a conqueror of the force he could not suppress, the essence of humanity itself. And above them, aboard the Dominion, the Emperor stood alone, contemplating what he had heard, what he had seen, and what he still did not fully understand. The word lingered in his mind, echoing across the void: humanity. It was a challenge, it was a warning, and perhaps for the first time it was a lesson. The stars outside the viewport twinkled silently, indifferent to the struggles of mortals, yet somehow the Emperor felt that the galaxy itself had shifted in that moment. The conquest of 5 systems was only the beginning. The true journey, the journey of understanding, of testing, and of discovering the heart of humanity, was only just beginning. And somewhere deep within him, the Emperor felt a flicker of something he had not felt in centuries: anticipation. Not for war, not for victory, but for knowledge. The Emperor spent hours aboard the observation deck, staring down at the planet Ro below. Its empty cities and silent streets gave no hint of the lives hidden beneath the surface, yet he knew that life persisted. Humanity had a way of enduring, of adapting, and even in apparent defeat it remained unbroken. Leora and her delegation had shown him the power of ideas over weapons, of spirit over fleets. And now, curiosity began to drive him in ways conquest never had. He summoned Kale and the senior officers into the council chamber. "We will not act through force," the Emperor announced. "Instead, we will study them, observe their behavior, and test the limits of their intelligence and ingenuity. If we wish to understand what they truly are, we must challenge them, not with weapons, but with puzzles, decisions, and situations that require creativity. Only then can we comprehend the essence of humanity." Conquest can be measured in planets, resources, and obedience. Understanding requires more. It requires insight into their problem-solving abilities, their cooperation, and their moral judgment. We want to see how humans respond to crises without the direct use of military force. But force will not be applied. This is about understanding humanity, not conquering it. The Emperor watched as the delegation adjusted parameters, adding variables that tested not just skill, but empathy, creativity, and decision-making. When the simulation began, Leora's eyes shone with anticipation. Humans within the virtual environment immediately sprang into action. Teams formed naturally, analyzing problems, distributing resources, and finding innovative solutions to impossible situations. Some discovered ways to generate power from previously untapped energy sources. Others devised communication networks that allowed coordination across the cityscape. Still others organized medical aid for simulated injuries. The Emperor observed in silence. He had seen military drills, fleet maneuvers, and planetary defenses, yet this was different. These humans were not reacting to orders or commands. They were creating, adapting, and learning. They were thinking, not just following. "Remarkable," the Emperor murmured. Kale, standing beside him, felt a mix of admiration and unease. "They perform as if the crisis is real. But my concern is, what happens when variables become unpredictable? That is the spark you cannot extinguish with conquest alone." It was not just intelligence he witnessed. It was resilience, creativity, and cooperation. Humanity, he realized, was more than strategy. It was dynamic, unpredictable, and endlessly inventive. Leora stepped forward. "Observe how they resolve conflicts without coercion. Humans do not always seek dominance over one another. In most cases, they negotiate, compromise, or innovate solutions that serve the greater good. This is what sets us apart. This is what endures." They were curious, compassionate, inventive, and capable of surprising brilliance. A small team could achieve what an entire fleet could not, simply because they thought differently, cooperated effectively, and refused to yield to hopelessness. "Perhaps this is why the word echoed so strongly," the Emperor said softly. "Humanity is not just a label, it is a force. Not of power, but of intellect and spirit." The Emperor ordered that controlled infrastructure challenges be placed in the major cities of Rho. Non-lethal, carefully monitored, and designed to test critical thinking, these scenarios included power disruptions, resource allocation puzzles, and environmental hazards. Humans were given no instructions, only the tools to solve the problems and the freedom to make decisions. Across the planet, the people of Rho mobilized. They worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts in ways that demonstrated adaptability far beyond what the Emperor had anticipated. Engineers devised new energy systems within hours. Doctors organized mobile clinics to treat simulated crises. Communities collaborated across districts to create communication networks that allowed rapid response. Every challenge was met with ingenuity, resourcefulness, and collective effort. The Emperor watched, increasingly fascinated. He had ruled through fear, strategy, and military might, yet here he witnessed a power he had never considered, an invisible, enduring strength that no fleet could destroy. He realized that conquest alone was insufficient to understand what humans were capable of. Only through observation, testing, and engagement could he begin to grasp the scope of their abilities. Leora reported daily on the outcomes. "They are not perfect," she explained, "but they are persistent. They learn from failure, they adapt to unforeseen circumstances, and they do not give up when obstacles appear insurmountable." That is the essence of humanity. By the end of the third cycle of tests, the Emperor issued a new directive. "We will extend these challenges, increase complexity, introduce unforeseen variables, allow humans to cooperate freely but observe how they respond under pressure, record every outcome." Adaptation is, observe how they respond, learn from it. That is the point. Do not assume failure diminishes them. Humans are strongest when they must learn, when they are pushed beyond comfort. That is a lesson fleets cannot teach. He asked Leora for explanations about decisions humans made in real time, trying to understand the thought process behind every choice. He noted patterns, strategies, and unexpected innovations. Slowly, he began to realize that the humans were teaching him without intention, guiding his understanding through their actions alone. At night, alone in the observation deck, he reflected on the word that had first captured his attention: humanity. It was no longer a simple term. It was a study, a challenge, and a revelation. Conquest could dominate bodies and territories, but it could not dominate spirit, creativity, or intellect. That required understanding. The humans of Ro continued their work, unaware that their success was reshaping the mind of the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. Leora and her team had achieved something remarkable. They had shown that true power lies not only in fleets and armies, but in the collective will, ingenuity, and courage of a species. The Emperor considered this carefully. Perhaps the greatest conquest was not of planets, not of systems, but of understanding the essence of a species. To rule wisely, he would have to learn, adapt, and appreciate the strength he had previously overlooked. For the first time, he allowed himself a thought that had been foreign for centuries. What if the measure of a civilization is not the ease with which it is conquered, but the brilliance with which it adapts, cooperates, and thrives? The simulations ended for the day, yet the Emperor could not tear his eyes from the data streams. He reviewed results, noted anomalies, and considered the implications of each human decision. Kale watched him quietly, realizing that this was more than observation, it was transformation. The Emperor himself was changing. Leora approached him at last, her expression calm but confident. "Do you understand now, my Emperor?" she asked softly. The Emperor turned to her, eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity, respect, and a hint of admiration. "I understand that conquest is simple, understanding is not, and that the human spirit is far more formidable than any fleet, weapon, or strategy I have ever known. It thrives through thought, cooperation, and courage. Observe, guide, and respect, and you will see the true potential of our species." As the stars of Ro twinkled in the distance, he reflected on the days to come. The fleets could wait. Conquest could wait. Observation, testing, and understanding would define the next phase of his rule. For the first time in his reign, the Emperor realized that the galaxy held more than worlds to be claimed. It held lessons to be learned, intelligence to be appreciated, and a spirit that could never be subdued. And deep within him, a spark of something unexpected continued to grow: respect. Days turned into weeks, and the Emperor's fascination with humanity only deepened. What had begun as a curiosity had transformed into something far more compelling. He no longer saw the humans of Ro as subjects or as obstacles. He saw them as a species capable of guiding even the most powerful ruler toward understanding, innovation, and ethical reflection. Leora and her team continued to work closely with the Emperor's council, designing new challenges that would push humans to the limits of ingenuity without causing harm. Each challenge was carefully measured: resource management under duress, environmental anomalies, simulated crises requiring immediate collaboration. And each time, humans rose to the occasion, finding solutions that exceeded expectations. The Emperor had begun to see patterns. Humans were not merely resilient, they were inventive, resourceful, and moral in ways he had not anticipated. They made sacrifices not out of fear, but out of consideration for others. They created systems that distributed resources fairly, even when the simulations could have rewarded selfishness. They solved problems collaboratively, often using solutions that no single mind could have conceived alone. Kale watched the Emperor with concern. "My Emperor, you spend hours analyzing these outcomes. Are we learning anything actionable, or are we simply being influenced by them?" In another, a group had devised an energy-efficient transportation network that allowed supplies to reach isolated communities quickly. Every decision reflected intelligence, empathy, and adaptability. "Kale," the Emperor said finally, "you have underestimated humans. You see fleets and armies, but they see opportunity and possibility. This is a strength beyond mere strategy. It is the core of what defines humanity. That is a power no fleet can truly emulate. That is what you cannot conquer, what cannot be measured in fleets or resources." Humans were teaching him a lesson that no conquest had ever imparted. Intelligence combined with empathy was a force beyond measure. He decided it was time to escalate the challenge. Not with violence, not with coercion, but with ethical dilemmas and strategic puzzles that would test humans' decision-making on a grander scale. The Emperor instructed his engineers to create a system of interconnected simulations spanning multiple regions of Ro, each with limited resources and conflicting needs. Humans would need to collaborate across vast distances, negotiating trade, technology, and labor to solve complex problems. The simulation began, and the humans of Ro responded with remarkable efficiency. Delegations traveled virtually between sectors, sharing knowledge and coordinating strategies. Conflicts arose naturally, but the humans resolved them through dialogue, compromise, and ingenuity. They allocated scarce resources to critical areas, innovated new technologies, and maintained the well-being of simulated populations. The Emperor observed in awe. These humans were not merely surviving, they were thriving under conditions designed to challenge them at every level. They demonstrated adaptability, cooperation, and foresight far beyond what he had anticipated. "This is extraordinary," he murmured. "They do not act out of fear or obedience. They act with purpose, insight, and compassion." That is why the word resonated so deeply. Humanity is not measured by submission or conquest. It is measured by resilience, creativity, and the ability to rise above challenges while considering others. Yet in every case, he had relied on fear, force, and obedience. The humans of Ro were teaching him something he had never understood. True mastery was not domination, it was insight. To rule wisely, he must understand the minds and hearts of those he governed. Kale, ever practical, cautioned him. "My Emperor, observation is enlightening, but we must not forget our priorities. The fleets, the systems, our power, they remain our responsibility. Humans are teaching me that leadership is more than force. It is wisdom, judgment, and empathy." They established communication networks to share knowledge in real time, devised sustainable solutions, and prioritized cooperation over competition. The Emperor began documenting the results meticulously. Every decision, every adaptation, every innovation was analyzed and recorded. He realized that humans were capable of self-organization and collective intelligence far beyond what he had assumed possible. Their successes were not random. They were the product of ingenuity, morality, and the enduring human spirit. One evening, the Emperor stood alone in the observation deck, staring at the data streams flowing across the holographic displays. Leora's words echoed in his mind. Intelligence combined with empathy is a force beyond measure. He considered the implications. If humans could solve problems that no fleet, no empire could resolve through force alone, then conquest was not the ultimate test of ability. Understanding was. He summoned Leora and her delegation to the observation deck. "I wish to speak directly," he said. "Your simulations have taught me much, but I want to understand the principles guiding your decisions. How do humans determine what is right when faced with conflict or scarcity? And we adapt when circumstances change. That is our strength, our resilience combined with our morality. Humans persist, adapt, and grow stronger with experience." Kale watched quietly, sensing the transformation in the Emperor's perspective. "My Emperor, these humans, they influence you," he said cautiously. The Emperor nodded. "Yes, and that is the lesson. Leadership is not simply about control. It is about understanding, observing, and responding thoughtfully. These humans teach me that the essence of power is not force, but insight and wisdom." It was more than conquest, more than fear, more than obedience. It was creativity, morality, resilience, and collaboration. It was a force that could inspire even the most powerful ruler to reconsider the very nature of authority. As the night fell over Ro, the Emperor remained in the observation deck, contemplating the simulations and the humans who had created them. He realized that the greatest conquest was not of territory or population, but of understanding, a conquest of insight, judgment, and moral comprehension. And somewhere deep within him, a spark of admiration and respect continued to grow. Not fear, not obedience, but genuine respect for the species he had once believed could be ruled through intimidation alone. The Emperor understood that the next phase of his journey would be different. He would no longer rely solely on fleets and armies. He would continue to challenge humans with simulations, scenarios, and puzzles designed to test their ingenuity, adaptability, and ethical reasoning. But he would do so not as a conqueror seeking submission, but as a student seeking knowledge. Leora and her team returned to their quarters, carrying the sense of accomplishment that came from knowing their actions had changed the perspective of a ruler who had once seen the galaxy in terms of domination alone. They had not fought battles with weapons. They had fought battles with intellect, morality, and spirit, and they were winning. The Emperor gazed out at the stars, understanding that the galaxy held lessons far beyond conquest. Observation, reflection, and engagement with human ingenuity would define the next phase of his reign. Humanity, he realized, was not a threat to power. It was the ultimate teacher of it. And as he stood there, surrounded by the silent hum of the Dominion, the word echoed once more, resonating in his mind with renewed clarity: humanity. It was the lesson, the challenge, and the key to understanding the future of his empire. The Emperor knew that he had only just begun to comprehend its full meaning. The trials would continue, the simulations would evolve, and the humans would keep teaching. But for the first time, he was eager not for conquest, but for discovery. In that quiet moment, the Emperor realized something profound. True mastery of a civilization was not measured by fear or submission, but by insight, respect, and the ability to learn from those he ruled. And humanity, he now understood, was the greatest teacher he would ever encounter. The Emperor stood on the observation deck of the Dominion, gazing out at the vast expanse of space. 5 systems had already felt his authority, yet his mind was no longer consumed by conquest alone. Humanity, the word that had first struck him like a challenge, now pulsed in his thoughts with clarity and purpose. What he had seen on Ro, creativity, cooperation, resilience, morality, was not unique to that world. It was a force that defined the species across the galaxy. Leora and her delegation worked tirelessly, coordinating simulations, analyzing outcomes, and providing insight into human behavior. Their successes had not only influenced the Emperor, but had also created a template for leadership he had never known. He had begun to understand that intelligence without ethics was brittle, that power without empathy could crumble, and that the ingenuity of humans could reshape even the most rigid ruler. The Emperor summoned his council. "We will extend our observations," he declared. "All systems under our control will participate in challenges designed to test their creativity, cooperation, and moral judgment. We are no longer measuring obedience, we are measuring potential. And understanding is the foundation of lasting power. Fear may command obedience, but insight commands loyalty, innovation, and progress. Humans respond best when challenges are fair, when they can think and choose freely." Systems that had once been subdued by fleets now faced environmental crises, resource scarcity, and complex societal puzzles. Human leaders, engineers, scientists, and everyday citizens mobilized to solve them. They collaborated across planets, sharing technology, strategies, and innovations. Where one system struggled, another offered guidance. Solutions emerged that no single mind could have conceived. The Emperor watched as a network of human ingenuity unfolded. Entire planets devised sustainable energy systems, agricultural networks adapted to harsh climates, and medical teams coordinated responses to simulated pandemics. Every decision reflected not only intelligence but morality. Humans prioritized collective benefit over individual gain, demonstrating foresight, empathy, and innovation. "This is remarkable," the Emperor said quietly. "They are not merely surviving, they are thriving under circumstances designed to challenge them at every level. It emerges in adversity, in cooperation, in thoughtful action." Every obstacle was met with creativity and determination. Kale, still wary, spoke cautiously. "My Emperor, you seem changed. You are learning from them. These humans teach me that intelligence, morality, and collaboration are forces stronger than fleets." He realized that humans were capable of solving problems that no fleet, no empire, could address through force alone. Their ingenuity was limitless, their spirit unbreakable. In one simulation, a system faced a critical resource shortage. Human leaders collaborated to develop a transportation and distribution network that allowed supplies to reach every colony efficiently. In another, an environmental disaster threatened multiple planets. Humans coordinated scientific efforts to stabilize ecosystems and prevent long-term damage. Every outcome reflected insight, cooperation, and moral judgment. The Emperor was astonished. "No fleet could have achieved this," he said to Leora. "No army could have organized such efficiency, such foresight. Humans, they are extraordinary." He realized that true mastery of a civilization was not measured by submission, but by insight, guidance, and respect for the species' potential. He decided it was time to act, not as a conqueror, but as a leader seeking understanding and partnership. He transmitted a message across all 5 systems. Humans were now invited to collaborate directly with the Dominion in shaping policies, infrastructure, and technology. The offer was unprecedented, a signal that the Emperor recognized their value beyond obedience. Across the systems, humans responded with enthusiasm and determination. Councils formed, teams coordinated projects, and knowledge spread rapidly. Solutions emerged that improved lives, stabilized economies, and fostered innovation. The galaxy was becoming a network of collaboration, guided by insight rather than fear. The Emperor observed the results in awe. "They are not merely surviving," he said. "They are improving. They are teaching me how to govern wisely, how to inspire, and how to shape the galaxy for the better. I understand, and I will ensure that humanity is nurtured, not suppressed. I will lead not as a conqueror, but as a steward of their potential. They have taught me that the greatest power lies not in fleets or armies, but in intelligence, morality, and cooperation." He no longer sought domination for its own sake. Instead, he sought understanding, collaboration, and insight, a radical change in philosophy. Over the following months, humans from all systems participated in unprecedented projects. Space travel became more efficient, medical technology advanced rapidly, and planetary infrastructure reached levels of innovation previously unimaginable. Knowledge and creativity flowed freely across systems, guided by insight and collaboration rather than coercion. The Emperor watched with satisfaction and humility. He had conquered 5 systems with fleets and strategy, yet he had learned that the true measure of power was not in conquest, but in understanding. Humans had demonstrated that the essence of strength lay in intelligence, adaptability, morality, and cooperation. In a private moment, the Emperor reflected on the journey. The word that had first captured his attention, humanity, had transformed his perspective, reshaping his approach to leadership, strategy, and governance. He realized that a ruler's greatest strength came not from fear or fleets, but from learning, listening, and empowering those he governed. Leora, sensing the Emperor's contemplation, spoke softly. "You have seen the power of humanity firsthand, and now, my Emperor, you understand that this species cannot be defined by fear or domination. They thrive when guided, respected, and challenged to grow. They are not just a species to be ruled. They are a force to be respected, nurtured, and inspired. That is a power greater than any fleet, any weapon." Across the systems, humans continued to innovate, cooperate, and thrive. The simulations had evolved into real-world applications, improving lives, advancing technology, and uniting civilizations. The galaxy was becoming a network of ingenuity, morality, and collaboration. And in the quiet of the observation deck, the Emperor repeated the word that had changed everything: humanity. It was no longer a challenge, no longer a mystery. It was a lesson, a guide, and a force that would shape the galaxy for generations to come. For the first time in centuries, the Emperor felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not from conquest, not from submission, not from fear, but from understanding. He had witnessed the power of humanity in action, and he knew that this force would endure far beyond fleets, empires, or wars. The humans had not only survived, they had transformed him. They had proven that the greatest victories are not measured in conquered worlds, but in the enduring spirit, creativity, and morality of those who dare to think, cooperate, and rise above every challenge. The Emperor turned to Leora and her team. "You have shown me the meaning of humanity, and I will honor it. Together, we will shape a galaxy where intelligence, courage, and compassion are the true measures of strength. Not through domination, but through guidance." And for the first time, he knew that humanity, the spark he had once underestimated, would guide him toward a future greater than conquest, greater than fear, and greater than power. And as the systems thrived, the simulations became reality, and human ingenuity spread across the stars, the Emperor understood one final truth. The word he had heard, the single word that had captured his attention, was not just a reminder, a challenge, or a lesson. It was the key to a galaxy where intelligence, courage, morality, and collaboration would define the future. Humanity had won not through weapons, fleets, or fear, but through its essence, its spirit, its creativity, and its ability to endure and inspire. And the Emperor, once a conqueror, had learned the greatest lesson of all: to respect, understand, and nurture the power of a species that could shape the cosmos through thought, courage, and heart. The stars sparkled in the void, silent witnesses to the transformation. Across the galaxy, humans thrived, collaborated, and innovated. And above them all, aboard the Dominion, the Emperor watched, forever changed by a single word: humanity.